Donald Trump's request for his Justice Department to just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me sounds a lot like his request to the Ukrainian president that led to his first impeachment. And he said, quote, "I would like you to do us a favor, though." This time, Trump was more desperate. He felt he could much more explicitly state his request because these were his people. There was no quid pro quo necessary. Daniel Goldman served as the House Majority Counsel in the first impeachment trial of President Donald Trump. Prior to that, federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, and he joins me now. I am struck by the similarities here, particularly that line, which I think is so damning. Just say it was corrupt and leave the rest to me. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Chris. It's the more desperate, more extreme, and more untethered Donald Trump trying to cheat, or in this case, overturn the election. I mean, the Ukraine impeachment was all about Donald Trump trying to cheat in the 2020 election. He had won the 2016 election using Russian interference. He wasn't charged criminally with that, but the Mueller report indicated that he certainly knew about it. His campaign knew about it, and they used the Russian interference. Then he tried to extort Ukraine into helping him cheat in the election, and then he lost the election, and now he's just simply going all out, so to speak, to overturn the election. It is a stunning, stunning request. And there are other things that in the notes that jump out to me that I think will be very relevant to prosecutors looking at Donald Trump's conduct in the aftermath of the 2020 election. The first thing he says that jumped out to me is, "You may not read the internet as much as I do." Well, you'll remember, Chris, that there was a lot of internet chatter about storming the Capitol right in the lead up through January 6th. And one of the issues in impeachment, too, was how much did Donald Trump know? Well, here he is admitting that he reads the internet. And then the other thing, which is separate and apart from the coup here, is him once again asking them to prosecute Hunter Biden. This is the president of the United States asking the Department of Justice to prosecute his political enemy. That is banana republic stuff.
You just said prosecutor. Here's the thing that I find really frustrating about this whole thing. First of all, the idea that anyone would let this man within sniffing distance of power is like manifestly insane and essentially a kind of democratic death wish, A. B, how can it not be the case that this is not a crime? I mean, someone once described the coup attempt as akin to someone walking down a hallway of a hotel and just trying every door, which is kind of what he did. It wasn't that sophisticated. It wasn't that tried out, but he just tried every door. Now, they all ended up locked, so he couldn't steal the stuff. But if one was open, he obviously would have. And that seems criminal to me, just in an intuitive sense.
Well, it's all evidence that could be used as part of some sort of sedition prosecution or a specific state prosecution, like what's going on in an investigation in Georgia, where he tried to interfere in the election in a particular state. So it's not that it is not potentially criminal. I just think that we all need to look at all of these notes and recordings as pieces of evidence in a larger puzzle. And that's why I point out that admission of his that he reads the internet. That type of thing can be very helpful for prosecutors to piece together a case. The problem is that no one has ever done this before. It's not something that's ever been anticipated, that a president would literally try to have a coup in order to overturn an election by will, purely by will, by might if he could have. But as we know by now, Mark Milley and others and Mark Esper in the Defense Department were not going to let that happen. So his outlet was these acting folks in the Department of Justice to try to use his power and coercion to get them to do his dirty work. And they resisted. The institutions held, that the individuals held ultimately, which is why it was a failed coup.
Well, and no, I just got to say, talk about world historical cowardice from William Barr. William Barr knows what the guy's up to. William Barr could have gone public, but he leaves, writes an utterly preposterous encomium to the greatness of Donald Trump, knowing full well the man is attempting a coup essentially in the moment, and then just hands over the job of protecting American democracies from said coup to Jeffrey Rosen and pieces out. Good work, buddy.
Yeah, and it's, up until the sycophantish resignation letter and him leaving, he did actually stand up to Trump on this one issue. He was his lackey and accomplice for 2 years, but on this issue, he said there was no evidence of election fraud. And that did set the stage, I think, for Jeffrey Rosen to be able to push back a little bit. So I am no fan of Bill Barr, but I actually think on this topic, other than abdicating the throne, so to speak, he did resist.
That's true. And maybe it's because I'm a journalist and because I have a television show that this occurs to me and it doesn't occur to functionaries, the Department of Justice. But no one goes public. Everyone's just plays the good soldier and doesn't say anything. The guy's rattling the cage trying to overturn an election. For the love of God, say something publicly. That's just me. Daniel Goldman, thank you very much. I appreciate it.